It is finally happening. She will not survive the night.
Are you certain?
The doctor confirmed it. We are free.
I can't wait to start a new life with you.
Finally!
It's for the best.
In the final hours before everything fell apart, Jessica Harrison lay on the hospital bed fighting for her life, while the people who should have been praying for her recovery stood just outside her door speaking in hushed, excited tones. The monitors in the labor and delivery ward at Mercy Hospital in Atlanta were beeping in a steady, rhythmic pattern just after 11 o'clock on a cool October evening in 2019. That sound is supposed to mean life. It is supposed to mean hope. But for Jessica Harrison, a 34-year-old kindergarten teacher from Marietta, those beeps were the only thing standing between her and the silence of the grave. She could not move her legs. The epidural had done its job, but it had also trapped her in place, paralyzed from the waist down, unable to run, unable to fight, unable to do anything except lie there and listen to the voices in the hallway. The door to her room was slightly open, just a crack, just enough for the fluorescent light from the corridor to slice across her bed like a blade. Her husband, Michael Harrison, was out there somewhere. She knew he was. She had heard his voice 15 minutes ago, low and annoyed, complaining about how long this was taking. Her mother-in-law, Virginia Harrison, was out there too, her sharp, aristocratic voice carrying through the thin hospital walls. And standing between them, her red dress reflecting the harsh overhead lights, was a woman Jessica had never wanted to meet. A woman whose face she had only seen in text messages she was never supposed to find. Amanda, the other woman. The woman Michael had been seeing for 14 months, while Jessica grew his child in her belly. Their words bled together at first, then sharpened into sentences she wished she could unhear. Casual remarks about how things were finally happening and how a fresh start would make life easier for everyone. Jessica tried to lift her hand, tried to ask for someone to bring Michael inside, but her throat felt too tight and her breath too shallow to form the sound she needed. For a moment, she wondered if her body was giving up before her mind was ready, and whether the children she carried would make it through the night without the mother who loved them long before she ever saw their faces. And just as the darkness at the edges of her vision began to widen, the door opened and the doctor stepped inside with a look that silenced every whisper in the hallway. A look that told them none of what they believed was about to happen would unfold the way they expected. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Jessica closed her eyes and let the tears run sideways down her temples, disappearing into the tangled mess of her brown hair spread across the thin hospital pillow. She had known about the affair for nearly a year. She had found the hotel receipts in the glove compartment of Michael's BMW. She had seen the text messages light up his phone at 2 in the morning while he slept next to her, believing she was asleep too. But she never said a word. Not because she was weak. Not because she was afraid. She stayed silent because she believed that once the baby came, once Michael held his own son or daughter in his arms, he would remember who he was. He would remember his vows. He would come back to her. That was what love was supposed to do, wasn't it? It was supposed to conquer everything. But as the contractions ripped through her body with a ferocity that made her bite down on her lip until she tasted copper, Jessica Harrison realized she had been a fool. The voices in the hallway weren't worried. They weren't pacing back and forth with anxiety and grief. They were laughing. Virginia Harrison, 62 years old, with her diamond tennis bracelet and her perfect blonde bob, had never liked Jessica. She made that clear the very first time Michael brought the young kindergarten teacher home to the family estate in Buckhead. Jessica wasn't from money. Her father was a mechanic. Her mother worked the register at a grocery store. She didn't go to the right schools, didn't play tennis at the right clubs, didn't know which fork to use for the salad course. Virginia had wanted Michael to marry Amanda. Amanda, whose father was a judge. Amanda, who had gone to Vanderbilt. Amanda, who knew how to hold her champagne glass without smudging the crystal. And now, standing in the harshly lit corridor of the maternity ward, Virginia got her wish. Jessica was dying. The doctors had already told them that. The placental abruption had caused a catastrophic hemorrhage, and the emergency cesarean section had only made the bleeding worse. Jessica had lost nearly 2 liters of blood, and her blood pressure was dropping like a stone. The medical team was doing everything they could, But Virginia could read the body language of the nurses who slipped in and out of the room. They were losing the battle. So Virginia stood there with her arms crossed over her expensive cashmere sweater, the pearl necklace her husband Robert had given her for their 30th anniversary, gleaming under the lights, and she allowed herself to feel something she had been waiting to feel for 6 long years. Relief. Finally, Michael would be free. Finally, the wrong woman would be removed from the picture. Finally, Amanda could take her rightful place in the Harrison family. And Amanda herself was right there, standing far too close to Michael, her red dress looking almost obscene against the sterile white walls of the hospital corridor. She had no business being here. Everyone knew it. The nurses knew it. The other families waiting in the maternity ward knew it. But Amanda didn't care. She had her hand on Michael's arm, her fingers pressing into the fabric of his tailored suit jacket, and she was whispering something in his ear, something that made him almost smile. Almost. He didn't smile fully because somewhere in the deepest, darkest part of his soul, Michael Harrison knew he was standing at the bedside of his dying wife, and he was doing nothing to stop it. He wasn't demanding answers from the doctors. He wasn't holding Jessica's hand. He wasn't praying. He was just standing there, letting his mistress comfort him, while his wife bled out on the other side of the door. The nurses who passed by that corridor would never forget what they saw. They would talk about it in the break room for years afterward. The way the Harrison family gathered like vultures waiting for a creature to take its last breath. Virginia was checking her diamond-encrusted watch every few minutes, annoyed that the process was taking so long. Robert Harrison, Michael's father, stood slightly apart from the group, his hands in his pockets, saying nothing, his face an unreadable mask of stone. He was a powerful man, a real estate developer who had built half of Atlanta's skyline. But in that moment, he looked small. He looked like a man who knew something was very wrong, but lacked the courage to say it out loud. And Michael, poor weak Michael, just stood there with his shoulders hunched and his eyes fixed on the floor, letting Amanda stroke his arm and whisper her sweet, poisonous conspiracies in his ear. They were celebrating. Not openly, not with champagne and confetti, but the celebration was there in the air like a foul perfume. The relief on Virginia's face. The possessiveness in Amanda's touch. The way Michael refused to look at his wife's hospital room, as if looking would make him responsible, would force him to feel something he was working very hard not to feel. Inside the room, Dr. Rachel Okonkwo was fighting a war she knew she might lose. She had been an obstetrician for 19 years, had delivered thousands of babies, had held the hands of women who were dying and the hands of women who were about to become mothers for the first time. But this case was different. The placental abruption had been sudden and catastrophic, tearing away from the uterine wall and cutting off the baby's oxygen supply, while simultaneously causing Jessica to hemorrhage internally. Dr. Okonkwo had performed the emergency C-section in record time, pulling a tiny, screaming baby girl from Jessica's womb and handing her off to the NICU team. But Jessica's body would not stop bleeding. She had tried everything. Medications to contract the uterus, manual compression, sutures. But the bleeding continued, a slow, inexorable drain that was turning Jessica's skin the color of paper. Jessica was fading. Dr. Okonkwo could see it in the way her eyes fluttered open and closed, in the way her responses to commands were getting slower and slower. She needed to tell the family. She needed to prepare them for the worst. So she pulled off her bloody gloves, straightened her scrubs, and walked toward the door, her heart heavy with the weight of the news she was about to deliver. She stepped into the hallway and immediately saw them. The mother-in-law with the pearls and the pinched, disapproving face. The husband who wouldn't meet her eyes. The woman in the red dress who didn't belong there, whose very presence was an insult to the woman fighting for her life just a few feet away. Dr. Okonkwo had seen a lot in her 19 years. She had seen husbands cry. She had seen husbands faint. She had seen husbands so overcome with gratitude that they fell to their knees. But she had never seen a husband whose mistress showed up to watch his wife die. She had never seen a mother-in-law check her watch while a young woman bled out. And in that moment, Dr. Okonkwo made a decision that would change everything. She would not give them the news they were waiting for. She would not give them the satisfaction of a clean, simple tragedy. She had seen something on the ultrasound, something she had kept to herself, waiting for the right moment. The moment was now. She walked up to the group, and they immediately straightened up, arranging their faces into masks of fake concern. Virginia was the first to speak. "How is she, doctor? Is she going to make it?" The question hung in the air, but Dr. Okonkwo heard the true question underneath. "Is she dead yet?" She looked at Virginia. She looked at Michael. She looked at Amanda in her red dress. And then she leaned in close and whispered 4 words that made the blood drain from every single face in that corridor. "The baby isn't the only one." The 4 words hung in the air of that hospital corridor like a death sentence. Except they weren't meant for Jessica. They were meant for Michael. They were meant for Virginia. They were meant for Amanda standing there in her obscene red dress with her manicured fingers wrapped around another woman's husband. Dr. Rachel Okonkwo had seen the look on Virginia's face when she walked out of that room. She had seen the barely concealed impatience, the way Virginia kept checking her diamond-encrusted watch as if Jessica's death was an inconvenience, a delay in her dinner reservation. She had seen the way Amanda smiled, not a sympathetic smile, not a worried smile, but the smile of a woman who knew she was about to get everything she had been waiting for. And she had seen Michael, standing there like a hollow shell of a man, not objecting to any of it, not defending his wife, not even asking how she was doing. Dr. Okonkwo had been delivering babies for 19 years, and in all that time, she had never hated anyone she met in a hospital corridor. But she hated these people. She hated them with a white-hot fury that she kept buried beneath her calm professional exterior. And that was why she decided not to tell them the truth right away. She decided to make them wait. She decided to let them wonder. Because the truth was far more devastating than any of them could possibly imagine. If you're still here with me in this story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps. And the next part of this story is where everything begins to come to light. Jessica Harrison, lying in that hospital bed with her blood pressure dropping and her skin turning the color of ash, had no idea what the doctor had just whispered to her husband's family. She was drifting in and out of consciousness, her mind floating somewhere between the fluorescent lights above her bed and the dark, quiet place where her body was trying to go. She could hear the nurses moving around her, their voices urgent but hushed, calling out numbers and medications and instructions she could not fully understand. She could feel the cold press of the blood transfusion line against her arm, the pinch of the 4, the weight of the oxygen mask strapped to her face. But more than any of that, she could feel her daughter, her baby girl, born just minutes ago, taken away by the NICU team in a rush of beeping monitors and hushed whispers. Jessica had not even gotten to hold her. She had not even gotten to see her face, not really. Just a blur of tiny fingers and a shock of dark hair before they whisked her away to a warmer, to a breathing tube, to a team of neonatologists who were fighting their own battle on a different floor of the same hospital. Jessica did not know if her daughter was alive. She did not know if her daughter was breathing. She did not know if her daughter would ever leave this hospital, would ever see sunlight, would ever celebrate a birthday or learn to ride a bike or fall in love. All she knew was that the people who were supposed to love her were laughing in the hallway while she died. Michael Harrison heard the doctor's whispered words, and for the first time all night, he felt something other than numb. The baby isn't the only one. What did that mean? Was there another baby? He thought back to the ultrasound, the one they had at 20 weeks, the one where the technician had pointed out the baby's head, the baby's heart, the baby's tiny kicking feet. There was only one baby on that screen. He was sure of it. He had been there, sitting in the plastic chair next to Jessica, pretending to be excited, pretending to care, when all he could think about was the text message he had received from Amanda that morning, a message he had deleted before Jessica could see it. There was only one baby. So what was the doctor talking about? He looked at his mother, hoping for some kind of explanation, but Virginia's face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. She was staring at Dr. Okonkwo with a look that Michael had never seen before, a look that was somewhere between confusion and fear. Robert, his father, took a step forward, his hands still buried in his pockets, his jaw tight. "What do you mean, doctor?" Robert's voice was low, measured, the voice of a man who was used to getting answers. But Dr. Okonkwo did not answer him right away. She looked at each of them in turn, her gaze lingering on Amanda for a moment longer than the others, and then she turned and walked back into Jessica's room, closing the door behind her. What Dr. Okonkwo knew, what she had discovered during the emergency cesarean section, was that Jessica's uterus had not been carrying one baby. It had been carrying 2. But the second baby was not visible on the ultrasound because it had been hiding behind the first, tucked into a corner of the womb that the technician had missed. It happened sometimes, especially with twins, especially when one baby was positioned directly behind the other. The second baby was smaller, much smaller, barely 1.5 pounds, and its heartbeat was weak, thready, barely there at all. But it was alive. Dr. Okonkwo had seen the second baby when she made the incision, had reached into Jessica's abdomen, and felt the tiny body curled up against its sister, waiting, surviving, fighting in a way that no one had expected. She had pulled the second baby out, a girl, just like the first, but smaller, so much smaller, with translucent skin and eyes that were fused shut and fingers the size of toothpicks. The NICU team had taken her too, rushing her upstairs to the same unit where her sister was already fighting for her life. Dr. Okonkwo had not told anyone about the second baby, because she wanted to be sure, because she needed to stabilize Jessica first, because there was so much blood and so much chaos and so many things happening all at once. But now, standing in the hallway with those vultures gathered around her, she knew it was time. Let them wonder. Let them twist in the wind. Let them spend every moment of the next several hours imagining what she meant, imagining the worst, imagining something they could never possibly understand. Back in the corridor, Virginia Harrison was the first to recover her composure. She straightened her cashmere sweater, touched her pearl necklace, and turned to her son with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Michael," she said, her voice cold and controlled, "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. The doctor is probably talking about complications, or medical jargon, or something we wouldn't understand anyway." But Amanda was not so easily reassured. She had been doing the math in her head, calculating how long it would take for the grieving period to pass, how long before Michael would be free to marry her, how long before she could move into the house in Buckhead and redecorate the guest bedroom and erase every trace of Jessica Harrison from the life she was about to inherit. 2 babies changed everything. 2 babies meant more money. 2 babies meant more time. 2 babies meant that Michael would be tied to Jessica forever, even if Jessica didn't survive, even if she never left this hospital alive. 2 babies meant that Amanda would always be the stepmother, never the mother, always the woman who stood in the hallway in a red dress while a young woman died, giving birth to twins that were never supposed to exist. She tightened her grip on Michael's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket hard enough to leave marks. Michael barely noticed. He was staring at the closed door of his wife's room, and for the first time all night, he was thinking about what he had done. He was thinking about the morning he first kissed Amanda in the supply closet at his office, a small dark space filled with boxes of printer paper and extra office chairs, a place where no one would see them. He was thinking about the lie he told Jessica that night, the excuse about a late meeting, the way she believed him without question because she trusted him, because she loved him, because she had given him her heart and her future and her body, and he had given her nothing but betrayal in return. He was thinking about the text messages he had sent while Jessica slept beside him, the hotel reservations he had made using a credit card she did not know about, the weekends he had claimed were business trips, but were really just long stretches of stolen hours in a high-rise hotel room with a woman who did not care about his marriage or his wife or the baby growing in her belly. He was thinking about all of it, everything he had done, everything he had hidden, everything he had destroyed. And standing there in that hospital corridor with his mistress gripping his arm like a trophy and his mother checking her watch like a countdown to freedom, Michael Harrison felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt shame. It rose up in his throat like bile, hot and bitter and impossible to swallow. But he did not act on it. He did not push Amanda away. He did not demand to see his wife. He just stood there, frozen, a coward in a tailored suit, waiting for someone else to tell him what to do. Upstairs in the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, the NICU team was working frantically to save 2 tiny lives. The first twin, the larger one, the one born with a strong cry and kicking feet, was doing better than anyone expected. She weighed 4 pounds and 6 ounces, small but stable, her lungs functioning well enough that she did not need a ventilator. The nurses had placed her in a warm incubator, wires and monitors attached to her chest, a tiny feeding tube running into her nose, but she was alive. She was fighting. The second twin was a different story. She weighed just 1 pound and 9 ounces, so small that she fit in the palm of a nurse's hand. Her skin was so thin that her blood vessels were visible underneath, a roadmap of blue and red lines that pulsed with every weak, struggling beat of her heart. She could not breathe on her own. The ventilator was doing the work for her, pushing air into her tiny lungs, forcing her to stay alive when her body wanted to give up. The neonatologist, Dr. James Whitmore, a gray-haired man who had been saving premature babies for 30 years, looked at the little girl and felt something he rarely felt anymore. Hope. She was small. She was fragile. She was fighting against odds that would have crushed an adult. But she had something he could not measure with any machine or monitor. She had a will to live that he could see in the way her tiny fingers curled and uncurled, in the way her heart rate spiked when the nurses touched her, in the way she refused to let go even when everything in her body was telling her to stop. Dr. Whitmore turned to the head nurse and gave a quiet instruction. Page Dr. Okonkwo. Tell her we need to talk about the mother. About what happened. About what comes next. Back in Jessica's room, Dr. Okonkwo was doing something she had never done before in 19 years of practicing medicine. She was lying to a patient. Not about the twins. Jessica deserved to know about the twins, and Dr. Okonkwo planned to tell her as soon as she was stable enough to understand. But about the family in the hallway. About the way they had gathered like vultures waiting for her to die. About the mistress in the red dress, and the mother-in-law with the diamond watch, and the husband who could not even look at his own wife's door. Dr. Okonkwo was not going to tell Jessica any of that. Not now. Not when her blood pressure was still dangerously low. Not when her body was still struggling to recover from the hemorrhage that had nearly killed her. Not when the grief of learning about her husband's betrayal might stop her heart when it was already so weak. So Dr. Okonkwo held Jessica's hand, the one without the four, and she smiled the same calm, reassuring smile she had given thousands of patients before. Jessica, she said softly, you need to rest now. Your body has been through something very difficult. You lost a lot of blood, but we are doing everything we can. Your babies are upstairs in the NICU. They are alive. They are fighting. And when you are stronger, you will see them. Jessica's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy with pain and medication and exhaustion. Babies. She whispered the word like a question, like she wasn't sure she had heard it correctly. Plural? Dr. Okonkwo squeezed her hand and nodded. Yes, Jessica. Babies. You had twins. 2 little girls. Both alive. Both fighting. Jessica closed her eyes and a tear slid down her cheek. Not a tear of grief, but a tear of something she had not felt in months. Relief. She was a mother. Not just to one child, but to 2. And no matter what happened next, no matter what Michael had done or would do, no matter how many times Virginia had wished her away or how many nights Amanda had spent with her husband, Jessica Harrison was not going to die. She was going to live. She was going to fight. She was going to survive for those 2 tiny girls in the NICU who needed her more than anyone else in the world. And she was going to make sure that everyone who had celebrated her death regretted it for the rest of their lives. The hours that followed were a blur of beeping monitors and hushed conversations and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes on polished hospital floors. Jessica Harrison drifted in and out of consciousness, her body slowly, painfully, clawing its way back from the edge of the grave. The blood transfusions helped. The medications helped. The surgeons who had worked on her for hours, repairing the damage inside her uterus, closing the vessels that had been pouring blood into her abdomen, they helped too. But what helped most was something no doctor could prescribe. Jessica had made a decision. She was not going to die. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever, if she had anything to say about it. She had 2 daughters upstairs in the NICU. 2 tiny girls who had never felt their mother's touch, never heard their mother's voice, never been held in their mother's arms. And Jessica was not going to leave them alone in this world. She was not going to let them grow up with Michael, with Virginia, with Amanda, with people who did not love them, who would see them only as obstacles, as burdens, as reminders of a marriage that should never have happened. She was going to live for them, and she was going to make sure that everyone who had wished her dead understood exactly what they had wished for. Michael did not come to see her that night. He did not come the next morning either. Dr. Okonkwo had told him that Jessica was stable, that she was out of immediate danger, that she was awake and alert and asking to see her babies. But Michael stayed in the waiting room on the 2nd floor, the one with the uncomfortable plastic chairs and the vending machine that only took dollar bills. the one where Amanda had set up a little camp with coffee cups and phone chargers and a blanket she had brought from her apartment. Virginia had gone home sometime around 3 in the morning, her perfect blonde bob finally starting to show the strain of a sleepless night, her diamond watch still ticking away the seconds of her inconvenience. Robert had gone with her, walking 2 steps behind his wife, his hands still buried in his pockets, his face still a mask of stone. They had not said goodbye to Michael. They had not asked about Jessica. They had not mentioned the babies, those 2 tiny girls fighting for their lives upstairs. They had simply left, as if the whole thing was an unpleasant obligation they had finally fulfilled, as if they had done their duty by standing in the hallway for a few hours, and now they could go back to their real lives. The ones that did not include a daughter-in-law they had never wanted or grandchildren they would never claim. Amanda stayed. She stayed because she wanted to be there when Michael finally broke, when the weight of what he had done came crashing down on him, when he needed someone to hold him and comfort him and tell him it was not his fault. She stayed because she wanted to be the first person he turned to, the one who was there when everyone else had gone home, the one who proved that she was not just his mistress, but his partner, his future, his everything. She stayed because she believed, with a certainty that bordered on delusion, that Jessica was still going to die. The doctors had said she was stable, but Amanda had done her own research on her phone in the waiting room, reading article after article about placental abruption and hemorrhaging and the long-term complications that could kill a woman days or even weeks after the initial crisis. She was waiting for the call that would tell Michael that his wife was gone, that the fight was over, that the 2 babies in the NICU were now motherless and would need a new woman to raise them. She had already picked out nursery colors in her mind. Pale pink for the walls, white for the furniture, a soft cream for the carpet. She had already imagined herself pushing a double stroller through the park in Buckhead, waving to the other young mothers, letting them wonder who she was. This beautiful woman with the beautiful twins and the handsome husband and the perfect life. She had already buried Jessica in her mind, not with grief or sadness, but with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had finally gotten what she wanted. Jessica did not know any of this, not yet. She did not know that Amanda was still in the hospital, still waiting, still hoping for her death. She did not know that Virginia had already called the family attorney to ask about grandparents' rights, about whether she could sue for custody of the twins if Jessica did not survive, about how quickly she could have them placed in a suitable home, her home, the one with the tennis court and the swimming pool and the nursery that was already being prepared for children who had never been invited. She did not know that Michael had not asked about her once, had not asked about the twins, had not asked about anything except when he could go home and take a shower. All Jessica knew was that she was still alive, that her daughters were still alive, that she had been given a second chance, a chance she was not going to waste. She was going to get out of this bed. She was going to walk upstairs to the NICU. She was going to hold her babies in her arms. And then she was going to find a lawyer, the best lawyer in Atlanta, the kind of lawyer who made powerful men like Robert Harrison nervous, the kind of lawyer who had never lost a custody case or a divorce case or any case at all. Because Jessica Harrison was done being the victim. She was done being the woman who stayed silent while her husband betrayed her. She was done being the daughter-in-law who smiled through the insults and pretended not to notice the way Virginia looked at her, like she was something stuck to the bottom of an expensive shoe. She was done with all of it. And she was going to make sure that Michael, Virginia, and Amanda were done too. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the maternity ward, pale and gold and full of the promise of a new day. Dr. Okonkwo came to check on Jessica just after 7, her face tired but her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. "How are you feeling this morning, Jessica?" Jessica looked up at the doctor, the woman who had saved her life, the woman who had pulled 2 tiny babies from her dying body and refused to let any of them go. She tried to smile, but her lips were cracked and dry, and the movement hurt more than she expected. "I'm alive," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "That's a good start." Dr. Okonkwo nodded and began checking the monitors, the 4 lines, the incision on Jessica's abdomen. "It is a very good start. Now, I need to tell you something about your husband. He has been in the waiting room all night. He is not alone." Jessica closed her eyes. She did not need Dr. Okonkwo to tell her who was with Michael. She had known about Amanda for months. She had known about the hotel rooms and the late nights and the text messages that disappeared as quickly as they arrived. She had known, and she had said nothing, hoping that her silence would save her marriage, hoping that her love would be enough. But now, lying in this hospital bed with her body stitched back together and her heart broken into 1,000 pieces, she understood something she had refused to see for a very long time. Love was not enough. Silence was not protection. And the only person who was going to save Jessica Harrison was Jessica Harrison. She opened her eyes and looked at Dr. Okonkwo. I know about Amanda. I have known for a long time. Dr. Okonkwo's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes, a recognition, a respect. What do you want to do? Jessica took a breath, slow and steady and full of purpose. I want to see my babies. And then I want you to tell Michael that I am awake, that I am asking for him, that I need to talk to him. But do not tell him about Amanda. Let him bring her. Let her stand there in her red dress and watch while I tell my husband that our marriage is over. Dr. Okonkwo smiled, a real smile, the kind of smile that had nothing to do with professionalism and everything to do with justice. I will tell him, Jessica. I will tell him right now. Dr. Okonkwo walked out of Jessica's room and down the hallway toward the waiting area where Michael and Amanda had spent the night. The fluorescent lights of the corridor hummed overhead, casting the same cold glow that had illuminated the scene the night before, when Virginia stood with her arms crossed and her diamond watch gleaming and her heart full of wicked relief. The doctor pushed open the door to the waiting room and found Michael slumped in one of the plastic chairs, his suit jacket wrinkled, his tie loosened, his eyes red and unfocused from lack of sleep. Amanda sat beside him, still wearing the same red dress, though it was now creased and tired-looking, like a party that had gone on too long. She had her hand on Michael's knee, her fingers tracing small circles on the fabric of his trousers, a gesture that was meant to seem comforting but looked, to Dr. Okonkwo, exactly like what it was. Possession. Amanda was marking her territory, letting anyone who walked into that waiting room know that Michael belonged to her now, that Jessica was just an inconvenience, a temporary obstacle between Amanda and the life she had been promised. Dr. Okonkwo stood in the doorway and waited until both of them looked up at her. She did not smile. She did not offer any of the gentle reassurances she usually gave to anxious families. She simply looked at Michael and said, "Your wife is awake. She is asking for you." Michael blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. He had not expected this. None of them had expected this. They had spent the night preparing for a different conversation, a conversation about funeral arrangements and obituaries and how soon was too soon to start dating after your wife died. Amanda's hand tightened on Michael's knee, her fingers pressing hard enough to leave bruises. She did not want him to go. She did not want him to see Jessica, to look into her eyes, to remember why he had married her in the first place. But Michael stood up anyway, pulling his knee away from Amanda's grip, and walked toward the door. Amanda stood up too, following close behind, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor like tiny gunshots. Dr. Okonkwo held up her hand. She did not say anything. She just looked at Amanda, her eyes flat and cold, and waited. Amanda stopped. She understood. She was not welcome in Jessica's room. She was not family. She was not a friend. She was nothing, less than nothing, a stain on the floor of a hospital that should never have let her through the doors in the first place. Michael did not look back at her. He did not say goodbye. He just walked past Dr. Okonkwo and down the hallway toward his wife's room, a man walking to his own judgment. Jessica heard the footsteps approaching her door long before Michael appeared. She recognized the rhythm of his walk, the slight hesitation in his left step, the way his shoes scuffed against the floor because he had never learned to pick up his feet properly. She had listened to that walk for 6 years. She had heard it approaching her door 1,000 times, in 1,000 different moods, happy, tired, angry, guilty. But she had never heard it sound like this. Slow, heavy, the walk of a man who knew he was about to face something he could not talk his way out of. The door opened, and Michael stepped inside, closing it behind him. He did not sit down. He did not come close to the bed. He stood just inside the door, his hands hanging at his sides, his eyes fixed on the floor, the same floor he had been staring at for hours in the waiting room. Jessica looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years, she did not feel love. She did not feel anger either. She felt something colder, something worse. She felt nothing. He was a stranger to her now, a man she had once trusted, a man she had once believed in, a man she had given everything to, only to watch him throw it all away for a woman in a red dress who did not even know how to hold a champagne glass without smudging the crystal. Virginia had wanted Amanda because Amanda knew which fork to use for the salad course. But Virginia did not know that Amanda had been married twice before, that she had a drinking problem she hid behind expensive sunglasses, that she had been fired from her last job for sleeping with her boss, the same boss she was now sleeping with in hospital waiting rooms while his wife almost died giving birth to his children. Jessica knew all of this. She had done her research. She had hired a private investigator 6 months ago, a quiet man with a camera and a notebook who had followed Amanda for 3 weeks and documented everything. She had the files. She had the photographs. She had the hotel receipts and the text message transcripts and the sworn statements from Amanda's ex-husbands. She had everything she needed to destroy Michael in a divorce court, to take his money, his house, his reputation, his future. But she had not used any of it. Not yet. She had been waiting for the right moment. And looking at Michael now, standing there like a lost child, she realized the right moment had finally arrived. "Michael," she said, her voice soft and steady, "come closer." Michael flinched at the sound of his name. He had expected yelling. He had expected tears. He had expected accusations and demands and all the things he deserved. He had not expected softness. He had not expected her to ask him to come closer. He walked toward the bed, his legs feeling unsteady, his heart pounding in his chest in a way that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with fear. When he reached the side of the bed, he stopped, still not looking at her, still staring at some invisible spot on the floor. Jessica reached out and took his hand. He flinched again, but he did not pull away. "I want you to listen to me, Michael. I am not going to yell. I am not going to cry. I am not going to beg you to come back to me, or ask you why you did this, or try to make you feel guilty for something you clearly do not feel guilty about. I am going to tell you what is going to happen next. And you are going to listen." Michael nodded, a small jerk of his head, the only response he could manage. Jessica tightened her grip on his hand, not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to let him know she was in control now. "You are going to leave this hospital. You are going to take Amanda with you. You are going to go back to the house we shared, the house I paid for with the money I earned from my teaching job while you played golf and complained about your father and pretended to run a business that was really just a way for you to avoid growing up. And you are going to pack your things. All of them. Every sock, every tie, every stupid trophy you won in high school that you made me. Display in the living room like anyone cared. You are going to pack everything and you are going to leave. You are not coming back. The house is mine. The car is mine. The furniture is mine. Everything we built together is mine. Because I have something you do not have, Michael. I have proof. I have photographs of you and Amanda in hotel rooms. I have text messages where you call me a burden and a mistake and a woman you wish you had never married. I have bank statements showing the money you spent on her, our money, the money that was supposed to be for our daughter's college fund. I have everything. And if you fight me on any of this, if you try to take the house or the car or even one single fork from the kitchen drawer, I will take it all to a lawyer. I will take it to a judge. I will take it to the newspapers if I have to. And I will make sure that everyone knows exactly who Michael Harrison really is." Michael opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He had never seen Jessica like this. He had never heard her voice so cold, so steady, so absolutely certain. This was not the woman who had stayed silent while he cheated on her. This was not the woman who had hoped and prayed and believed that love would conquer everything. This was someone new, someone he did not recognize, someone who terrified him. Jessica released his hand and lay back against her pillows, her eyes never leaving his face. "You have 24 hours, Michael. 24 hours to clear out of my house and my life. If you are not gone by this time tomorrow, I will call my lawyer. And I promise you, you will regret it." Michael turned and walked out of the room without saying a word. He walked past Dr. Okonkwo, who was standing in the hallway with her arms crossed. He walked past Amanda, who was waiting outside the door with her red dress and her desperate eyes. He walked past the nurse's station and the vending machines and the families who were waiting for good news instead of bad. He walked all the way to the parking garage, got into his car, and sat there for a long time with his hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. Amanda followed Michael to the parking garage, her heels clicking against the concrete floor, her voice calling his name over and over again like a child who had lost her parents in a crowded store. Michael did not answer her. He did not turn around. He got into his car, locked the doors, and sat there with his hands on the steering wheel, watching her through the windshield as she pounded on the glass with her palm. Her red dress was wrinkled now, her perfect makeup smudged from a night of no sleep, her expensive hair falling out of its careful arrangement. She looked old, he realized. She looked tired. She looked like a woman who had spent years chasing something she could never quite catch, and now that she had almost caught it, it was slipping through her fingers. Michael started the engine, put the car in reverse, and backed out of the parking space without looking at her. He saw her in his rearview mirror, standing alone in the middle of the parking garage, her arms wrapped around her body, her mouth open in a scream he could not hear. He drove away. He did not know where he was going. He could not go home. Home was no longer his. Jessica had made that clear. He could not go to his parents' house. Virginia would ask questions he did not want to answer. Robert would look at him with that cold, disappointed stare that made Michael feel like he was 12 years old again, failing a math test he had not studied for. He could not go to Amanda's apartment. He did not want to see her. He did not want to hear her voice or smell her perfume or feel her hands on his body. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to rewind time. He wanted to go back to the morning before Jessica went into labor, before the placental abruption, before the twins, before everything, and make a different choice. But there was no rewinding time. There was only the road ahead of him, empty and gray, and the weight of everything he had destroyed pressing down on his chest like a collapsed lung. Jessica did not watch Michael leave. She did not listen for the sound of his footsteps fading down the hallway. She did not wonder where he was going or whether he would come back. She had said what she needed to say. She had drawn the line. Now it was time to focus on what mattered. Her daughters. She pressed the call button beside her bed and waited for a nurse to appear. A young woman with kind eyes and a name tag that said Becky came through the door a moment later, her face bright with a smile that faded slightly when she saw the expression on Jessica's face. "Are you okay, honey? Do you need something for the pain?" Jessica shook her head. "I need to see my babies. I need to go to the NICU." Becky hesitated. She looked at the monitors, the 4 lines, the incision on Jessica's abdomen that was still fresh and raw and held together with surgical staples. "You lost a lot of blood, honey. You nearly died. You need to rest. You need to give your body time to heal." Jessica sat up in bed, ignoring the sharp pain that shot through her stomach, ignoring the way her vision went gray for a moment, ignoring everything except the burning need to see her daughters, to touch them, to hold them, to prove to herself that they were real and alive and hers. "Becky, I have been resting for 18 hours. I have been lying in this bed while my babies are upstairs fighting for their lives without me. I am not asking permission. I am telling you what I am going to do. You can help me walk to the elevator, or I can crawl, but I am going to see my daughters today." Becky looked at her for a long moment, and then she nodded. "Let me get a wheelchair, and a blanket, and a nurse who knows how to say no to patients who do not listen to reason." Jessica almost smiled. Almost. 10 minutes later, Becky pushed Jessica's wheelchair into the elevator and pressed the button for the 3rd floor, where the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit lived behind a set of double doors that required a security code and a badge and a prayer. Jessica sat in the chair with a hospital blanket wrapped around her shoulders and her hands folded in her lap, her knuckles white with a tension that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the overwhelming, crushing, beautiful weight of love. She had never seen her daughters. Not really. Just a blur of tiny fingers and dark hair before the NICU team whisked them away. She did not know what they looked like. She did not know if they had her eyes or Michael's nose or her mother's stubborn chin. She did not know if they were going to live or die, if they would ever leave this hospital, if they would ever see sunlight or feel grass under their feet or blow out candles on a birthday cake. She knew nothing, except that she loved them. She loved them with a ferocity that surprised her, a love so big and so fierce and so absolute that it made everything else fall away. Michael, Amanda, Virginia, the affair, the betrayal, the years of silence and pain and pretending. None of it mattered anymore. All that mattered were the 2 tiny girls waiting for her behind the double doors, the 2 tiny girls who needed their mother, the 2 tiny girls who were going to grow up strong and smart and brave, who were never going to stay silent when someone hurt them, who were never going to let anyone treat them the way Jessica had let herself be treated. The elevator doors opened, and Becky pushed the wheelchair down the hallway toward the NICU. A nurse at the desk looked up, recognized Becky, and buzzed them through the double doors without a word. The NICU was quieter than Jessica expected. She had imagined crying and beeping and the chaos of machines fighting to keep tiny bodies alive. But it was quiet. Peaceful almost. The kind of quiet that came from people working very hard in very small spaces, from parents holding their breath, from babies who were too small to cry. Becky pushed the wheelchair past row after row of incubators, past nurses who nodded at them without looking up from their work, past parents who sat in plastic chairs with their faces pressed against the glass of their babies' rooms, praying for miracles Jessica was not sure they would get. Dr. James Whitmore, the gray-haired neonatologist who had been saving premature babies for 30 years, met them at the door to a small, private room at the end of the unit. He looked at Jessica, at the wheelchair, at the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, at the determination in her eyes, and he did not tell her she should be resting. He did not tell her she was too weak to be here. He had been a doctor for 3 decades, and he had learned long ago that mothers were the strongest people on earth, that they could do things that defied medical logic, that they could walk through fire for their children and come out the other side barely singed. He opened the door to the private room and stepped aside so Jessica could see inside. There were 2 incubators in the room, side by side, their clear plastic hoods reflecting the soft light that filtered through the windows. Inside each incubator was a tiny baby, so small they barely seemed real, so fragile they looked like they might break if Jessica breathed on them too hard. But they were alive. Jessica could see their chests rising and falling, could see the monitors tracking their heartbeats, could see the feeding tubes and the 4 lines and the tiny oxygen masks that were keeping them alive. Her daughters, her twins, her reasons for living. She turned to look at Dr. Whitmore, her eyes filling with tears for the first time since she had woken up in this hospital bed, and asked the question she had been too afraid to ask since the moment she first heard the word twins. Are they going to be okay? Dr. Whitmore put his hand on her shoulder, gentle and warm and full of something that was not quite certainty, but was close enough. The bigger one, the one we born first, she is doing remarkably well. She is breathing on her own now. She is eating from a bottle. She is strong. The smaller one, the one we did not know about until she was born, she is fighting. Every day is a battle. But she is still here. She is still fighting. And as long as she is fighting, so am I. Jessica nodded, unable to speak, unable to do anything except look at her daughters and feel the tears running down her cheeks, hot and salt, and full of a gratitude she could not put into words. She had almost died bringing them into this world. She had almost left them motherless. But she had not died. She was here, and she was never going to leave them. Not ever. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. Jessica Harrison moved out of the hospital and into a small apartment near the NICU so she could be close to her daughters. She sat by their incubators every day, reading to them, singing to them, touching their tiny hands through the portholes in the plastic hoods. The bigger twin, whom she named Grace, grew stronger every day. She gained weight. She learned to breathe on her own. She started to cry, loud and demanding, the cry of a baby who knew exactly what she wanted and was not afraid to ask for it. The smaller twin, whom she named Hope, took longer. There were setbacks, infections, breathing problems, days when her heart rate dropped and the alarms went off and the nurses came running. But she survived. Day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, she survived. And when she was finally strong enough to leave the hospital, almost 4 months after she was born, Jessica carried her out into the sunlight and held her up to the sky and promised her that she would never have to fight alone again. Michael did not come back. He had taken Jessica's warning seriously. Within 24 hours, he had moved out of the house in Marietta, packed his bags, and disappeared into a cheap apartment on the other side of town. Amanda tried to follow him, but he would not answer her calls. He would not open his door. He would not look at her face. He had lost his wife, his children, his house, his reputation. He had lost everything. And he blamed Amanda for all of it. Not himself, never himself, because Michael Harrison was not the kind of man who took responsibility for his own choices. He was the kind of man who blamed everyone else, who pointed fingers, who made excuses. Amanda tried to fight back. She showed up at his apartment building, screaming his name in the parking lot, demanding that he talk to her. The police were called. A report was filed, and Amanda, the woman who had worn a red dress to a hospital while another woman died giving birth, was finally forced to accept the truth. Michael had never loved her. He had never intended to leave Jessica for her. She had been a distraction, a game, a way for him to feel powerful and desired and young. And now that the game was over, now that there were consequences, now that people were watching, he wanted nothing to do with her. She moved to Florida 6 months later, to a small town where no one knew her name, where no one asked about her past, where she could start over and pretend that none of it had ever happened. But she could not pretend. The memory followed her. The red dress, the hospital corridor, the look on Dr. Okonkwo's face when she whispered those 4 words. It followed her everywhere. Virginia Harrison tried to sue for grandparents' rights. She hired a lawyer, a shark in a tailored suit, and filed a petition with the court, demanding regular visitation with the twins. She claimed that Jessica was an unfit mother, that she was too poor, too uneducated, too common to raise children who deserved the best of everything. She brought character witnesses. She brought financial statements. She brought a photograph of her own house, the one with the tennis court and the swimming pool and the nursery she had prepared for children who were never invited. Jessica showed up to the hearing with her own lawyer, a woman named Evelyn Carter who had never lost a case and had no intention of starting now. Evelyn stood before the judge and presented the evidence. The text messages, the hotel receipts, the testimony from the nurses who had seen Virginia checking her watch while Jessica bled out, the photograph of Amanda in her red dress, standing in the hospital corridor with her hand on Michael's arm. The judge read everything. He looked at the photograph for a long time, and then he denied Virginia's petition in full. He wrote in his ruling that Virginia Harrison had demonstrated a pattern of cruelty and emotional abuse that was not in the best interests of the children. He wrote that the twins would be raised by their mother, and only their mother, until such time as she chose to allow others into their lives. Virginia appealed. She lost again. She appealed again. She lost again. Finally, after almost 2 years of legal battles and wasted money and bitter defeats, she gave up. She stopped calling. She stopped writing. She stopped pretending that she had ever wanted anything except control. Robert never spoke during any of it. He sat in the back of the courtroom, his hands in his pockets, his face a mask of stone. He did not defend his wife. He did not defend his son. He just sat there, watching, saying nothing. Some people said he was ashamed. Others said he was afraid. But no one really knew. Robert Harrison had spent his life building walls around himself, and now, in his old age, he was trapped behind them. Jessica did not waste her time thinking about any of them. She had better things to do. She had twins to raise. She had a teaching job to return to. She had a life to rebuild, brick by brick, on a foundation that was stronger than the one Michael had tried to destroy. She moved back into the house in Marietta, the one she had paid for with her own money, the one that was now hers, free and clear, with no trace of Michael anywhere. She painted the nursery pale yellow, not pink, not blue, but the color of sunshine. She bought a double stroller and walked the twins through the park every morning, waving to the neighbors, smiling at the other mothers, living her life without apology or shame. She did not date. She did not look for love. She had tried love, and it had nearly killed her. But she was not bitter. She was not angry. She was at peace. She had come through the fire and emerged stronger on the other side. She had learned that the only person she could count on, the only person who would never betray her, was herself. And that was enough. That was more than enough. Grace and hope grew. They learned to crawl, then to walk, then to run. They learned to talk, first in single words, then in sentences, then in long, complicated stories that they told to anyone who would listen. They looked like their mother, both of them, with Jessica's brown hair and Jessica's stubborn chin and Jessica's fierce, bright eyes. They did not look like Michael at all. They did not ask about him. Jessica had never hidden the truth from them. She told them, when they were old enough to understand, that their father had made bad choices, that he had hurt people he should have protected, that he was not a part of their lives because he had chosen not to be. She did not speak about him with anger or bitterness. She spoke about him the way she might speak about a stranger, someone she had known once, a long time ago, in another life. The twins accepted this the way children accept most things, as simple fact, as the way the world worked. They had their mother. They had each other. They had a home full of love and laughter, and the smell of pancakes on Saturday mornings. They did not need anyone else. The twins turned 18 on a warm summer evening, with a party in the backyard of the house in Marietta, the same house where Michael had once lived, the same house where Jessica had once cried herself to sleep, the same house that was now filled with the sound of laughter and music and the voices of young women on the edge of their own futures. Grace was tall and confident, with her mother's stubborn chin and a laugh that filled every room she entered. She was going to college in the fall, to study law, to become the kind of lawyer who fought for people who could not fight for themselves. Hope was smaller, quieter, more like the fragile baby who had fought for her life in the NICU all those years ago. But she was strong too, in her own way, with a will of iron and a heart that never quit. She was going to art school, to paint, to create beauty in a world that so often seemed ugly. Jessica stood on the porch and watched them, her daughters, her twins, her reasons for living, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Not the desperate, clinging hope of a woman trying to save a marriage that was already dead. Not the fierce, protective love of a mother watching her children fight for their lives. Just joy. The simple happiness of a job well done, of a life well lived, of a battle hard won. She had come so far from that hospital bed, from that dark October night when she had almost died, from those voices in the hallway, laughing, celebrating, waiting for her to give up. She had not given up. She had survived. And now, standing on her porch with the sun setting behind her and her daughters laughing in the yard, she knew that she had won. Not because Michael had lost. Not because Virginia had been silenced. Not because Amanda had run away. She had won because she was still here. Because her daughters were still here. Because love had not destroyed her. It had saved her. If you've stayed with this story until the end, like the video and subscribe to the channel. More real stories of betrayal, truth, and justice are coming next.